Well, today we are in part 3 of this series called You Are Here. And what we've said throughout this series is we've talked about that anytime you go like on an adventure or on a trip or you're going on a hike or somebody invited you to go to this restaurant clear across town that you've never been there, having a map is extraordinarily helpful. I mean, you pull up your phone and you look at the map and it, not only provides the direction of where to go, but it also provides a lot of great information. Information around, hey, here's, the highway's blocked or there's a wreck, or information around lots of traffic, or information around, here's toll charges if you want to avoid all those. And that direction and that information is extraordinarily helpful to help you, enhance your experience, to help you get there efficiently, to help you, prevent you from getting lost. And ultimately, it just helps you get to where you want to get to. And guys, that's not only true when it comes to maps, on road trips, or if you're hiking, or that really cool restaurants you've never been to before. That's not only true there, but it's also true when it comes to our spiritual journey, specifically our Christian spiritual journey. Because when it comes to the spiritual journey, I'm just telling you, there is so much confusion. And this confusion along the spiritual journey has led us to go down paths that lead to all kinds of discouragement. This kind of confusion on the spiritual journey has led us to kind of mix these paths and go left, go right, go forward, go backwards. Go all these different places and ultimately get lost to where you feel like you want to give up, or you feel like you've kind of lost this hope. And ultimately, this confusion on the spiritual journey, it's led to a lot of confusion around the outcome of Christianity. And what I mean by that is this, is if I was to sit down with you and you and I were just chatting, having coffee or whatever, and I wasn't a Christian, and I was just saying, hey, I'm thinking about becoming a Christian. I've looked at Jesus, looked at a lot of the evidence. And my question for you is what's the point? What's the destination? What's the goal? And you may respond, you may go, well, so you can go to heaven, so you can be forgiven and have peace with God. And I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just in this life. What is the goal? What's the outcome? If I choose to do this, what am I stepping into? And I think there's a whole lot of confusion here. I think a lot of us would answer and we would say, well, it's information. If you step into this whole Christian journey, you're just going to get a lot more information. And the more information you can get and the deeper information you can get, eventually you're going to get to a place to go, wow, I've arrived. I've come to this knowledge. It's amazing. I think sometimes we would say, no, it's not information. It's being good. If you can be good, like your character, your morality, you clean up your whole life, eventually you're going to get to this place where you're just so content and so much joy. Or maybe you would say, no, it's not information. It's not, being good. It's doing good. That's the outcome. That's the goal. To do more good, to love as Jesus loved. And if we can just do that and make the world a better place, that's the goal. That's why you would step in to Christianity. Now, guys, all those are part of the spiritual journey, information, being good, and doing good. But the danger is, if that's the destination, if that's what you think the goal is, or that's the outcome, you will be in a perpetual state eventually of discontentment and discouragement. So the question becomes, well, what is it? And how do we clear up these confusing aspects and not go on these kind of, dead ends or get lost? How do we figure all that out? Well, that's the whole point of this series. And that's why we're doing this. And that's why we've talked about this spiritual map over here. And this spiritual map is, the intent of this is not only to give us direction, but also information. And along our spiritual journeys, we've talked about the fact that there's these 7 kind of trail markers. And the idea of this is, if you've ever been hiking, you've seen those trail markers that have the information. It's like, hey, you're here, and here's some information about where you're standing, and here's how to get to the next trail marker, and here's some of the dangers and some of the cool experiences. It's all on there. And that's the information piece. And our hope throughout this series is to go, hey, let's give us all some direction, and let's give us some information along the way, because our ultimate hope is not only to get to the destination and experience what God has invited us into, but to clear up a whole lot of the confusion, to help us not go down these paths to where we get stuck, or go down these paths to where we're like, man, this is what's the point? There's so much discontentment. So that is why we're doing this series. Now, in week 1, I kicked the whole series off, and one of the things I talked about is the destination. In other words, what's trail marker number 7? If you step into this journey, what is God inviting you into? And what we said in week 1 is ultimately the invitation is into a love relationship with God through his Son, Jesus Christ. And the idea here is that when you trust in Jesus, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like Jesus, I'm in. I trust you are who you claim to be. And then it's like over a lifetime, we're moving closer and closer and closer into this oneness, into this intimacy, into this love relationship with God. And the destination is to experience this oneness. And when you experience this love relationship, it's much more experiential. It's hard to quantify in terms of information. But what you experience here in this love relationship with God through Christ is a greater reality. It's a greater truth. It's a greater love. It's a greater life. I mean, what you experience here is complete fulfillment, complete oneness with God. You completely feel secure. And we talked about you're completely free to be who God designed you to be. As close as I could try to describe this, what you experience in this love relationship with God and trail marker number 7 is everything that your soul longs for, like legitimate. Everything your soul longs for in meaning and hope and happiness and joy and contentment in in your identity and worth and value. Everything you're like, man, I so long for this is satisfied. And trail marker number 7 is satisfied in that love relationship with God. Now, guys, I think if you're a Christian or not a Christian, I think we all would long for that. We may question if that's true, but if we would say, if that's true, if everything my soul longs for, the most important things in life, if that could actually be satisfied somewhere, then how in the world do we get there? Well, again, that's why we're doing this series. And in fact, in week 2, Jordan began to kind of guide us on this journey. And Jordan said, okay, let's kind of make our way here. And he started with trail marker 0. And trail marker 0, we said, is all about exploring. Trail marker 0 is when you're kind of looking at the big map and you're asking these big questions. This is before you become a Christian. This is before you put your faith in Jesus because you have far more questions about Jesus, which is totally fair. This is a time to go, man, I've got questions about science. I've got questions about church history. I've got questions about, Buddha and Muhammad and Jesus. Really, what's the difference? I mean, come on, let's have honest discussions. And I think those are wonderful. I think that's fantastic. In fact, one of the greatest desires for me at Northpoint is to create the safest place in the world for anyone to ask any question and feel like they are completely free to do so. That's just exploring. And eventually, the ultimate question you've got to ask and answer in trail marker 0 is, who is Jesus? Yes, we can talk about the Old Testament. Yes, we can talk about the New Testament. Yes, we can talk about other religious, books and activities and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, the question is, you got to answer this. Who do you say Jesus is? Who is Jesus? And Jordan did a great job. He said there's really only 3 answers. He's either a liar, he's a lunatic, or he's actually who he claimed to be. He's the Lord. And if you move to that place, and it's a choice, but if you choose to make Jesus and say, okay, I'm taking that step of faith, I'm putting my confidence not in me to be my functional Savior and me to have peace with God, but I'm putting my trust and faith in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of my sins so I can have peace with God and my eternity can be secure. I believe who he claimed to be, the Son of the living God and my Savior. The second you do that, you move from trail marker 0 to trail marker number 1. And trail marker 1 is new beginnings. And if I had to describe new beginnings, I would describe it in one word. I'd say it's all about discovering. This is like, man, I'm discovering all this new reality. Like, this is who I am in Christ. This is my new identity. This is my worth. This is my value. That's so cool. Like, I don't have to go look for that. Like, God, you've actually given that to me. Wow, that's amazing. This is where you begin to discover, like, on the cross when Jesus said, it is finished. Like, that's legit. Like, it's really finished. Everything you've done, past, present, future, all of your sin, big and small, it doesn't matter. It's all been satisfied. It's all been paid in full. And you begin to discover this freedom, this newfound freedom of forgiveness. You discover things about your eternity, discovering things about the church, discovering things about the Bible perhaps you've never known. It's just this time of incredible discovery. But it's also a time that you begin to discover there's a big difference between believing and following. You begin to discover as you read the Bible and, perhaps you're in a small group or connection or whatever, you discover like Jesus actually called you to follow him in every arena of life, not only to believe in him, which is cool, like that's amazing, and man, my eternity is secure, I'm forgiven. But now Jesus says, man, I want you to follow me is the invitation in every area of your life. And now you're beginning to kind of go, wow, well, here's what I do in my life. Here's my feelings and my emotions and my desires. And Jesus, that just doesn't match up exactly with what you've called me to do. And now once you come to a place in trail marker number 1 where you've discovered too much, is the way I would phrase it, where you're like, I've discovered too much about this tension right here between my life and what Jesus has asked me to do to follow him, you're on the cusp of trail marker number 2. And when you get to trail marker number 2, here's what it looks like. You kind of look at the trail and you're like, whoo, that's steep. That's like really steep. And trail marker number 2 is very like, jagged and lots of edges and there's some cliffs and you're like, wow, that looks tough. And if you decide to move forward, trail marker number 2 is really between a rock and a hard place. And if I had to describe it in one word, I would describe it this way. I would say it's an awakening. It's like now you've discovered something and your eyes have been opened. Now you see life differently. You see yourself differently. And now you begin to see Jesus differently. And this tension that I described between believe in Jesus and follow Jesus is ever so active. And now you're going, okay, here's what I want, here's what I think, here's what I desire, here's what I feel. But Jesus, you've called me to something different. And now there's a big tension. And now the question you begin to face, this is the rock and the hard place, the battle. The question you have in trail marker number 2 is, are you going to follow Jesus personally, morally, relationally, spiritually, financially, sexually? What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do? Because at this point, you've discovered enough and your eyes have been opened enough to where you know. It's not one of these things to go, well, relationally or sexually or morally or financially, Jesus, what did you really say? Did you really mean this? There's only 2 verses about this. There's only 6 verses about this. I mean, was that the intent? Was that just a cultural thing? No, you know enough at this point. At this point in trail marker number 2, you know in the depths of your soul exactly what Jesus called you to do. It's crystal clear. And it's this tension. And the tension exists between what are you going to do? It's a rock and a hard place. It's because I have these feelings and desires and these emotions and I want to do this. And here's the trick, or here's the thing that you got to know. That if you give in to your feelings and emotions and things that may be opposite to what Jesus called you to do, I mean, it does satisfy. It does make you happy. It is content. There is joy. There is like, oh man, I finally feel happy. I feel this feeling I've been looking for. Oh, I'm experiencing. It's awesome. And you call your friends and you get on social media. Man, I'm so glad I made this decision. I feel so liberated. I feel so alive. It's so good. But it's kind of like a glass of water. When you drink a glass of water and you're thirsty, it quenches your thirst. But 2 hours later, you're thirsty again. You're thirsty again. You're thirsty again. And you're starting to feel that. And even though it is satisfying, even though it has brought you some joy, you're thirsty. And then on the other hand, over here, you've discovered enough and your eyes are open enough to know that Jesus over here is going, hey, I know you're thirsty. And you've heard Jesus say in the scriptures, I have living water. And if you're willing to drink of my living water, you will never thirst again. And you're like, what? Yeah, you'll never thirst again. What does that look like? I mean, Jesus, don't you want me to be happy? Don't you love me? If you love me and if you want me to be happy, then I can give into my feelings and my desires and my emotions. And Jesus says to you and to me, he says, man, I love you enough. I love you enough to say, hey, what I'm inviting you to follow me over here is far better. It's far better. You're just going to be in this perpetual state of thirst. Here, it will satisfy in a way you've never fully experienced. But it's going to come at a cost. If you choose to follow me, Jesus says, it's like taking up your cross. In the first century, to take up your cross felt like suffering, felt like hardship, felt difficult. And then he said, it's also going to feel like a loss. In other words, you're in this battle. And this battle is going to be, if I give up my feelings and desires and emotions and submit them to you, Jesus, it's going to feel like I'm going to lose something that I so desire. Jesus says, I know. I absolutely know, but what I'm inviting you into is better. What I'm inviting you into is living water. And it's going to come at a cost, kiddo. It's going to feel like a big loss, but it is far more satisfying to your soul. You trust me? You trust me? You know what the Bible calls this? It's like this massive battle between the flesh and the spirit. The flesh and the spirit. What are you going to do? And here's where you know you're on the cusp of moving from trail marker 2 to 3. Is when you begin to develop these kind of emotions, if you will, or these feelings or experiences of where you're kind of getting sick and tired of this whole battle. To where you're going, hey, I'm giving in to what I want, what I feel, what I desire. And you're like, yeah, it's like it is sad. It's cool. It's fun. Yeah, it's good. But then I'm thirsty again. Is this all? It's got to be something more transcendent. There's got to be something better. And then you're looking at Jesus and he's like, yeah, there is something better. And I'm inviting you into it, kiddo. But you got to trust me. Yes, it's going to come at a cost. And yes, it's going to feel like a loss. But what are you going to do? And when you get to a point in your life where you're kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired, where you're sick and tired of playing this game to where you're like on both sides and yeah, I want to do and I give in over here and I'm doing this and doing this. And you come to the point to go, there's got to be something better. Man, you are on the edge of making a gigantic leap into something so incredibly adventurous. I remember this specifically for me when I took this big step between trail marker 2 and 3. In fact, it's so vivid, I remember the day. It was a Saturday. It was Saturday, July 29th of 2000. At this time in my life, Jill and I had been married about a year and a half. And so we're experiencing some of the newness of marriage. No kids were on the scene yet. And so we're experiencing that whole season together. At this time in our lives, I'd been a follower of Jesus for about 10 years plus. And I've been in trail markers 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and feeling this kind of tension. Jill had been a follower of Jesus about the same time. And we've gone back and forth and back and forth. And I'm telling you, in this time frame, July 29th of 2000, I was getting to the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was like, okay, I keep giving in to what I want, what I desire, what I feel, my emotions, all these kind of things. And I don't want to submit them to you because I have no idea what that looks like. And that's going to be hard and that's going to come at a cost. But this just doesn't satisfy. And I keep playing this. It's like, I don't know. And that Saturday, I remember Jill and I go up to Dallas for one of my best friend's weddings. We celebrate his wedding. It's an amazing wedding. We're so excited for him. After the wedding, we throw a massive party, or he throws a massive party, pays for it, which is to our benefit, which is great. And so we go, and we're like partying it up, having a great time, bunch of friends. I'm in this hotel room. There's all these people in there. And man, I'm just having, the time of my life. It's fantastic. And I'm drunk as a skunk, and, here's my, buddies, and they're all hanging out. We're celebrating. We're having a good time. And one of my buddies I'd known for about 10 years, he knew me well. He looked at me and he said something, and it wasn't what he actually said. It wasn't like the sequence of words. It was a timing thing. It's like you hear sometimes Christians say it's like God kind of reached down and it was like a God timing thing. That's the best I could describe it. Because he looks at me in that moment and he says, Buck, here's the deal. Because I was just mouthing off and saying some stuff. He said, Buck, here's the deal. You talk a really good game about Jesus. You talk about how much Jesus means to you and how much purpose he brings and how you wish these things for all these people. But I look at your life, and your life is nothing like what he called you to do. And I'm telling you, in a second, I sobered up. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And so we went to bed that night, Jill and I, and woke up the next morning. And we're driving back from Dallas. And I just said, babe, we got to go figure this out. We got to go figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus, because he says there's living water and we will never thirst again. And if he gave his life for us and died for us, then it's logical to land in the place that what he's inviting us into is actually real. That's tangible. That can be experienced. So we got to go figure that out, because I have no idea what that looks like. And we need to do a lot of things that we're doing, relationally and morally and all these kind of, there's a lot of things that is leading to a lot of regrets in our marriage and in our life that it may not be a bad idea to go check this out. So we get home, and I call up the church we were part of, and I said, hey, I'd like to meet with the pastor, see if I could, figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus. And they said, well, here's this guy, his name's Peter. Talked to Peter. Peter said, Buck, I'll meet with you. It's got to be at 5:30 a.m. at Denny's on 183. if you're in, I'll do it. And I'm like, 5:30? Are you crazy? I was like, okay, I'll do it. I mean, I just want to know if this is true. So I said, fine, I'll get up. I met him for 2 years, 5:30 in the morning, and he began to teach me what it looks like. And I began to sip a little of that water that Jesus is talking about. Guys, I'm telling you, it is real. It is real. It is real. At the end of those 2 years, Peter looked at me and he said, Buck, have you ever thought about starting a church? And I was like, he's got to be off his rocker. I'm working at Dell, making good money, climbing the ladder. I could see a future, all this kind of stuff. Little did I know, 7 years later, that Jill and I, with an incredible group of people, would start Northpoint and have a front row seat to the activity of God in the most meaningful of ways. And on July 29th of 2000, I made a decision to follow Jesus. And that is trail marker number 3. Trail marker number 3 is this idea of, hey, I'm in. I'm following Jesus. If I had to describe a little bit like, hey, what does this look like? Here's a few things I wrote down. That we were convinced that Jesus is the only way to live. Like, it's like we've played this game going back and forth, and here's what I feel, here's what I want, here's what I desire. And I'm not saying those are wrong. It's just like, what are you going to do with those? We just said, hey, we've given into that, and we hadn't tasted everything. But categorically, once you go down this category, I mean, it can get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's the same feeling. You're thirsty again. You're thirsty again. And we were just convinced there's got to be a better way. In other words, you could say it this way, that all other ways are less fulfilling. I had the privilege to play professional golf and on the mini tours, not on the big tour, just to clarify. But I had the privilege to play with a lot of great golfers and to experience some times and relationships with golfers who'd won U.S. Opens. They got to the pinnacle of their career, millions and millions and millions of people, all the fame you could imagine, all the money you could imagine. And the more I hung out with them, the more time I spent with them, they were doing the same thing. They were equally as thirsty as me, just in a different way. And so I said, man, all other ways are less fulfilling. So babe, let's go for it. Let's follow Jesus. So the question is, how do you know if you're in trail marker number 3? If you looked at the trail marker sign and it said you are here, what would it say? For you to go, oh, okay, that's where I'm at. I think one of the things it would say is that Jesus is better. Like you've drawn the line in the sand. You've come to this place that maybe you're experiencing the tension I talked about, to where you're kind of playing both sides. And it's not like you become sinless and perfect. That's not what I'm talking about. Man, you struggle with that your whole life. It's just as like I'm so committed to this, that Jesus, yes, here's my desires and here's my emotions and feelings, but I'm so committed to whatever you say, because if you said it, I have to believe on the other side of whatever the cost and whatever the loss, it's going to be far better than anything I've ever experienced there, so I'm going for it. It's that kind of decision. Jesus is better. And so we said, that's it. If you've made that kind of decision, or you're leaning in that kind of decision, that's how you know you're in trail marker number 3. The other way that you know you're here is that you're known publicly and privately as a follower of Christ. That you've prioritized your whole life around following Christ. And I'm not talking about in the weird kind of legalistic ways to where, and if this offends you, I'm not trying to, but where you wear t-shirts and stickers and, make a bunch of points. And if you do wear t-shirts and stickers, fine. But I'm just saying to where that's all there is, right? I'm talking about where it's something so deeply in you that you want to make a difference, not a point. And it's so, I've wrapped my whole life around Jesus and what he's called me to do, and I've prioritized the things he's called me to prioritize. And people publicly and privately, they now know me as a follower of Jesus. It's like your identity has shifted publicly and privately. One of the ways I can illustrate this is I think I experienced something similar in 8th grade. In 8th grade, middle school years, those were kind of my, Heisman years in football, because then I switched to golf in high school. That's not relevant at all. But my 8th grade year, there was a very popular show, and if you're my age, you know the show. It's called 90210. And everybody watched 90210. I mean, that was the thing, and there's Dylan, and there's and he's living in a hotel, and I'm like, I want to live in a hotel at 8th grade. That's going to be perfect for me. I was like, man, I just love this show, and all my friends would talk about it the next day, and we're all talking about 90210, and did you catch the episode and the whole thing? It was awesome. But then, in 8th grade, I made a big shift, publicly and privately. I used to part my hair from here to here. 8th grade, I looked at this guy, Dylan, and he's cool. He lives in a hotel. I aspire to be everything he is. And so I started spiking my hair in 8th grade. And here I am, a 45-year-old man, and I'm still spiking my hair as I did in high school or middle school. My best friend, he calls me on this all the time. He's like, Buck, don't you realize that started in middle school? Shouldn't you change this at some point? I'm like, no, I kind of like it. Anyways, but the point is this, is that when I would go out publicly, now my hair is spiked. When I would be private and I'd be in my house, there's my sister, my mom, and dad, and they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, Dylan, it's cool, right? And they're like, oh, yeah. So privately and publicly, when I would go out, people would recognize, because the show was so popular, oh, your hair looks like Dylan. Oh, it looks like you made that change. Yeah, I was recognized by that. Well, same thing. I mean, that's a kind of odd illustration, but if you can make the giant leap with me, the same thing would be true that you are known publicly and privately as a follower of Christ, which means now church is a priority. Church is no longer one of those things to go like, if it's convenient or if I'm sober enough or, if I don't have anything else that's competing. No, it's your priority. It's not legalistic like a weird religious thing. It's just sometimes you're going to say no to your kids on Sunday morning for sports. Hey, no, church is our priority. Like this, we're going to wrap, because what Jesus offers is better. So we got to prioritize that. This means when it comes to the Bible is no longer, that's one of those things that stand. No, man, you're reading the Bible. In fact, you're asking questions about God in the Bible in new ways, and God is like showing you things, and you're taking steps. It's tangible. You're beginning to experience that kind of love relationship aspects of that. And it's like, man, what God showed me this morning is so relevant for today and what I face today. Wow. It's like God is right there with me. It's like I'm experiencing this peace that truly does transcend all understanding. When it comes to your prayers, it's no longer like, God, give me, help me pass the test, give me, big bank account, whatever it is. And those things are fine. But prayer is way more relational. Prayer is that you go to God, and it's not because you're going to God because of his character and who he is. You're going to God because you love him. And you're talking about that. God, I love this about you. Thank you so much for that. And then you're going to God, and you're really honest. And you're like, God, today I just don't feel it. I don't feel this connection with you. What's up with that? What is it in me that's causing that? Can you show me that? And your prayers begin to be a time of reflection. This is when financially, it's no longer this mental, emotional, kind of internal lawyer battle. I mean, it's still there, it's present. You feel the emotions, but you just said, no, Jesus, you've been really clear on the finances. I mean, the hope of the world is the church. There are a lot of great organizations that do very specific things around the world. The church does all kinds of things around the community. And Jesus, you said, man, to be radically generous. And as your follower, I'm going to just choose to do that. And yes, I've got a million reasons why I don't want to do that. But Jesus, what you say is better. And I'm committed to that. And it's going to come at a cost, and it's going to feel like a loss. But if you said it's better, I'm going with you. And financially, we begin to prioritize and be a percentage giver. And prioritize the importance and say, God, I just trust you. My hands are open. What you've called me to is better. This means trail marker number 3, you find yourself here. You're serving perhaps in ministry. Maybe you're leading in ministry. Maybe you're on a church staff. Maybe you're going to school to be in ministry. Or maybe you're even a lead pastor. I mean, you can be in trail marker number 3 and be a pastor, be a lead pastor, be on staff, leading in all kinds of areas of ministry. That's trail marker number 3. And it's amazing. And last of all, certainly not least, there's a lot of, but you're here when your worldview changes. A worldview is origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. That this is foundational for you. This is what you know. Now, not that you don't doubt it from time to time, but you know this foundationally in your soul. Origin. In the beginning, God. Now, how did God do it? We can debate that till the cows come home, but in the beginning, God. Okay, I'm settled. And in the beginning, God created the male and female, which means he created you with intrinsic worth and value. Which means your identity, your worth, your significance, you don't have to look for it in all this stuff. You don't have to keep chasing all this stuff. Now, be responsible, yes, but in terms of your value, worth, and your identity, it's already been given to you as a gift. And this is where, because your origin is in the beginning God, you begin to look at yourself and go, man, God created me, knit me together in my mother's womb. And you begin to discover masculinity and femininity in all kinds of amazing ways. And the power and the beauty and the meaning and the purpose to why God created you exactly the way God created you, and it's foundational. And you're stepping into that going, wow, I'm experiencing something I've never experienced. When it comes to meaning, you're stepping into his meaning. When it comes to morality, I mean, it's no longer a question, well, did God really say? Does God really mean? No, he's so crystal clear. When it comes to morality, yes, feels like a loss, and it comes at a cost. But he's clear. And when it comes to destiny, I know my eternity is secure in heaven. Not because of me and look at all I've done. Look at what he did for me. My goodness, that's amazing. And not that I don't fear death at times and think about it and have some doubts. Of course, that's human. You're human. But man, my security is that my eternity is secure. Jesus said he goes and prepares a place for me there. His promise is that when I die, I will go from this life to the life to come. So I look forward to that. That's his promise. That's more foundational. Origin, meaning, morality, destiny. And it's awesome. But there is a tension in trail marker number 3. That over time, and guys, I got to be clear with you. Trail marker number 3, for the majority of followers of Jesus, that's as far as they will go. It doesn't have to be that way, but for the majority of us, that's as far as we go. And as you spend time here, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I don't know, however long, as you spend time here, there's going to be a tension. And the best way I can describe this tension, it's like this spiritual treadmill, to where you find yourself asking this question, is this all there is? In other words, that you are so busy and you're going, Jesus, I trust you, it's better, I trust you, it's better. I'm going to do this for God, I'm going to be busy for God. Whatever you ask me, I'm doing, I'm trusting you. And man, your life is all wrapped around the activities and the busyness of what God's called you to do. And now you're starting to feel this feeling to go, man, there's some great things and wonderful things, and you're stepping into that love relationship, and you're experiencing and taking drinks of that living water, and that's real. But you're also going, is this all there is? Man, I'm as busy as I've ever been. I'm doing more for God than I've ever done in my life. I'm trusting him in more ways than I've ever trusted. But there's got to be something more. Because it kind of feels like I'm on a treadmill. And if you're not aware of this, if you're not careful, before long you begin to believe this in trail marker number 3. That the harder I work for God, the deeper my relationship will go. Or said a different way, you begin to believe this, that work done for God is equal to relationship with God. So if you believe that, then you got to get busier. You got to do more. You got to go deeper. You got to get more information. You got to do more stuff. And because eventually that's going to make me go deeper with God relationally. That is a slippery, slippery slope. You know what that's kind of like? It's kind of. And it's like a parents who have their kiddos, you know, and they have their first little, you know, Sally or Johnny or whoever, you know. And there they are, they're brand new babies, and they're looking at them, and oh my gosh, you know, flesh of my flesh. You know, people probably don't say that, but, you know, you're looking, and you're like, oh man. And now all of a sudden you start to shift your activity and work. And it's meaningful. Of course you should. This is what a good parent would do. And now you're like changing diapers and sleepless nights, and now you're trading off with one another who's going to get up and who's going to feed and how are we going to feed as they get older, who's going to have the conversation about puberty and all this. I mean, this is all this work, and it's meaningful work, and it's wonderful work. But if you're not careful, and in this relationship, if it's all about the work and not the relationship, and this doesn't have a greater priority than this, I mean, odds are you're going to wake up one day and go like, who are you? You're just not doing it for me any longer. You're kind of boring. Like, I don't know if I'm in love with you. You prioritize the work over the relationship. If you're not careful in trail marker number 3, you will get so busy with Christian activity that you'll miss the bigger adventure that God invited you into, which is being with him. And guys, I'm telling you, if you find yourself here, if you're here and there's tension, you're going to find yourself saying things like this. The teaching isn't deep enough. The church isn't deep enough. The ministry isn't deep enough. It's just not doing it for me any longer. And if you've ever felt that, experienced that, can I just say something that may sound a little bit awkward? If you felt like you're on this spiritual treadmill, I think that's wonderful. I think that's exactly where you need to be. I think that is one of the most wonderful places because it's the time, it's the season. You are on the cusp of moving to something even more wonderful and greater in trail marker number 4. Oh, you're so on the edge. It's the time, perhaps, of some of the greatest maturing in your Christian journey. And I would say it's wonderful because there's so much more ahead of you. So if you were to go like, well, Buck, then how do you get from 3 to 4? How do you get to this new trail and experience this thing that's perhaps more wonderful? Well, I think there are some steps. And I think if you and I are just talking, I would say, here's a couple things I just want you to consider. And the first and foremost, I would say this, is that you need to know there's a spiritual map. There's a spiritual map. Guys, in my life, I'm 35 years old. I'm the lead pastor of Northpoint. I'm engaging and I'm at trail marker number 3, and I'm exhausted. I'm working my butt off like no tomorrow to go deeper, to get more information, to learn more, to do more, to be more active, to be more holy, to do everything I can. And I'm like, dude, this treadmill, I'm exhausted. And then I met with somebody who would be, I would call like a spiritual guide, a spiritual director. And they said, oh, Buck, don't you know there's actually a map? Don't you know there's actually so much more? Don't you know you're not even halfway there? And I went, what? Yeah. And this spiritual director began to talk about, what you did in 1, 2, and 3, that's foundational. That's so important. You can't get to 4 without going through 1, 2, and 3. I mean, that is critical for you to begin to experience God and take a giant step into that love relationship with God. Don't feel like you've wasted these years or these years are in vain. Man, they're so important. But Buck, I want you to know there's so much more. That there is a wonderful adventure that God has invited you into. And I'm telling you, it was so refreshing to my soul, so wonderful to my ears to know that longing inside of me to go, isn't there something more? Isn't there something beyond these Christian activities that's better? The answer is yes. Part of a step is just knowing there's something ahead. The second thing I would say is a spiritual guide. It's to have somebody in your life to normalize what's going on. Somebody in your life that's in trail marker 4, 5, 6, or 7 who can say, hey, I get it. Man, I've run that spiritual treadmill for a long time, and here's what you feel, and here's what you think, and here's what you experience, and you start blaming it on the preacher and the church and all this kind of stuff, right? Yeah, that's exactly what I feel. Man, me too. I felt that too. It's so helpful. At this point, you do need a guide to bring you to 4, 5, 6, and 7 in those trails. Somebody to go, hey, let me tell you the difference between doing for God and being with God. Because in trail markers 1, 2, and 3, it's a lot about doing for God. It is foundational and critical. But there is a gigantic shift in trail marker 4 to start knowing what it feels like to be with God. You need somebody to walk you through that, a guide. This could be a small group leader. It could be a mentor. It could be a pastor. It could be a counselor. For me, it was a counselor. And I'm telling you, if you're willing to accept the invitation to the wonderful adventure that God has invited you into, here's what I can tell you is real. What is real is there is something greater. There is a greater reality. There is a greater truth. There is a greater love. There is a greater life ahead of you. I promise you that. And I can also tell you that the things in your soul that you so long to be met, and so often we meet them in our flesh, I can tell you that the living water that Jesus is inviting you and I to drink, that certainly comes at a cost and feels like a loss, it does satisfy the greatest longings of your soul. That is real. We'll pick up the conversation right there next week. Let me pray. Father, thank you so much that we can have discussions like this. These discussions are really important. There's a lot to them, a lot more that can be said in this time. And God, I know you know that. And I know you know the hearts of everyone here and everyone listening and watching online. And so, Father, in only the way that you can. Would you meet our hearts? Would you meet our minds? Would you meet our questions? Would you meet our pushback? And would you give us the courage to take a step and to accept the invitation towards the wonderful adventure you've invited us into? God, I trust you with all that. You're big enough to handle it. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next week.